now present For the Record.
A few days ago, we filed this lawsuit.
The fact that the law is 173 years old is not negated.
I mean, there's an 1849 ban on adultery. I mean, should we be enforcing that?
In my opinion, yes.
What's the line between serious medical condition and somebody's going to die? I'm so glad that I don't have to make those decisions every day, which is why we need to leave that up to doctors.
Welcome to this special edition of For the Record. We'll be spending the next half hour diving deep into how Wisconsin has weathered the last week after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade on Friday, June 24th. It's a decision that left shockwaves across the state. Here's what a woman in Wisconsin had to say.
My concern with overturning Roe versus Wade is getting pregnant again and not getting the care that I need. We saw this happen in Ireland when they outlawed abortion and mothers died.
The law just went so far to where you're going to tell people who have been raped or who are victims of incestual rape that you now have no choice.
I am outraged. I even more so don't want to have a family now because I don't want to raise a daughter in a world where she has less rights than her mom and her grandma did.
An 1849 law in Wisconsin bans all abortions except those needed to save a mother's life. It's a law in theory made enforceable with the repeal of Roe v. Wade. This week, Attorney General Josh Kaul and Governor Tony Evers filed a lawsuit in the Dane County Circuit Court challenging that law, a challenge that is likely to get appealed all the way up to the state Supreme Court, which is controlled by conservative judges. The Attorney General joins me now. Good morning.
Good morning.
So let's talk about the idea behind this lawsuit. It's this 1849 law. It conflicts with other later laws. Talk me through the specifics of where you believe those conflicts are.
Yeah, well, first, this result of the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe versus Wade is that we now have this 19th century abortion ban that has no exceptions for rape or incest, that is still on the books, that arguably is in force in Wisconsin. That has made access to safe and legal abortion stop in Wisconsin, and the result is that women in Wisconsin are less free, less equal, and less safe than they had been just last week, and that is not acceptable. And so we are doing what we can to fight to restore access to safe and legal abortion in Wisconsin. A few days ago, we filed this lawsuit that is arguing that the 19th century ban is unenforceable because of two reasons. One is that there were several laws passed more recently that regulate legal abortion and are in conflict with this 19th century ban. And so we're arguing that those laws impliedly repealed the 19th century ban. We're also arguing that the ban is no longer enforceable because it has fallen into disuse, that it hasn't been enforced for over 50 years, and even before that was only sporadically enforced. And principles of notice and fairness mean that this ban can't be enforced now all of a sudden after it's been dormant for more than 50 years.
But the accusation here from your Republican opponents for Attorney General, the Republican-controlled state legislature, the argument here is that you're picking and choosing laws to enforce. What would you say to that?
Well, first, we have laws that are in conflict, and you can't have, for example, an abortion to save the health of the mother be both legal and illegal, but there's an exception to protect the health of the mother under more recent laws, but not under the old law. And so we have a situation where the legislature has left conflicting laws. We're trying to resolve that situation. Secondly, prosecutors use their discretion to enforce laws all the time. We've got limited resources, and we've got to decide how to use those as effectively as possible. Now, it's my view that we should use those resources to investigate and prosecute the most serious crimes like homicides and sexual assaults and drug trafficking. That's what we've been doing at the Department of Justice under my leadership, and we're going to continue to do that. Now, there are others who seem to think that instead resources should be shifted to go after people for abortions, investigating and prosecuting doctors and nurses. I don't think that's how our resources should be used. I think it would be harmful to the health and safety of women in Wisconsin, and as Attorney General, I'm not going to use our resources that way.
The Sheboygan County District Attorney said this week that he plans to enforce the law against any doctors who might perform an abortion in his county. Do you plan or have any ability to try and limit what county-level district attorneys do until this lawsuit is resolved?
Ultimately, it's up to each DA and police chief and sheriff to decide how to use the resources that they have and which laws to seek to enforce. I've discouraged DAs and sheriffs and police chiefs from using those limited resources on abortion cases. I think there are far better uses for those resources. But it's up to the DAs and sheriffs and police chiefs.
A brief note here, Wisconsin's existing law can only be used to prosecute doctors, not people actually getting the abortion. But kind of that context said, there's been a lot of warnings circulating online telling people to not use period tracking apps, for example, or other pregnancy planning tools. And the fear here is that digital data may be used to investigate people who are pregnant. Is this a real threat?
One of the things that I'm concerned about is that we are going to see abuses of the investigative process. In Kansas, a couple decades ago, they had an attorney general named Phil Klein, and he very aggressively used subpoena power to seek people's, what was really people's private medical information. I hope we don't see that, but if you think about how these laws would be enforced, investigators would need to get very invasive personal health care information to meaningfully enforce these laws. I certainly hope we don't see that, and I would strongly discourage any investigators from doing that. But we don't really know yet what enforcement of this law is going to look like, because remember, this has been dormant for over 50 years. And so we're taking a 19th century law and trying to apply it to 21st century medicine if people are going to enforce it.
Is there any possibility, perhaps under another administration or even under local district attorneys, that people who are seeking abortions out of state might be criminalized, even though the law, well, in theory, only applies to doctors?
Under current law in Wisconsin, women can't be prosecuted. There's an exception for the mother, the woman who's obtaining an abortion. There's also nothing that prevents people from leaving the state to obtain an abortion under Wisconsin law. But the law could change. There has been advocacy, for example, for even repealing the exception to save the life of the mother. And so it's really important that people contact their legislators and let them know where they stand on this issue.
Last question for you. So we've talked about the lawsuit. You've already said you won't enforce this. Anything else that you are planning in terms of practical action steps in the wake of Roe v. Wade's overturn?
Well, we're continuing to communicate with people in other states to facilitate if people are going out of state. I've been in contact with the Illinois AG, for example, regarding licensing for doctors and nurses. I met with the vice president and some other AGs last week. And I think that you will see continued efforts across states to work to minimize the harm from the Supreme Court's decision last week. And then we've got to keep working to get legislation passed that's going to repeal this ban. We have been left in this place where we're, again, applying a 19th century ban to 21st century medicine. And there are all sorts of questions that haven't been answered and that are really impossible to answer under the law until we get a court decision. But having the legislature act to protect the health and safety of women in Wisconsin is needed. And I hope that they will rethink the approach that they have been taking, which is to just ignore this issue and instead to come back into session and take action.
All right, Attorney General Josh Kaul, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, when we come back, anti-abortion groups of the nature that he just mentioned are eyeing that one exception included in our law right now. That's next.